The galaxy was full of wonders, but not all of them were beautiful. On a remote asteroid colony that drifted near the edge of the known universe, there lived a creature that everyone whispered about, but no one wanted to see. They called him the Galactic Lion. He was not like the golden lions people imagined in stories. He was ugly, with scars that twisted his face and a mane that had been burned and broken from countless battles. His eyes, sharp and piercing, seemed to look right through a person, and his claws could shred metal as if it were paper. Despite being the deadliest creature in the galaxy, he was alone. The colony's people feared him and hated him for his appearance. Children ran away screaming when they caught a glimpse of his jagged teeth, and adults whispered behind their hands, calling him a monster. Traders who passed through refused to dock near the sector where he roamed. No one dared to look into his eyes too long, and no one tried to understand him. He wandered the rocky terrain of the asteroid colony, moving silently, yet every step he took seemed to shake the ground. When he walked, even the wind seemed to bend around him, as if the universe itself respected his presence. But still, he was neglected. He was not given food, care, or shelter. He survived on scraps, picking through abandoned machinery, hunting small alien creatures that had been overlooked. Every day was a struggle, yet he endured. His mind was sharp, and he learned how to avoid the colony's patrols and traps that were set to keep him away. Even in his solitude, he felt the sting of loneliness. The others had families, friends, and companions. They celebrated, laughed, and shared warmth. But he had no one. Sometimes, when he rested beneath the cold stars, he thought about what it would be like to belong somewhere, to be accepted, even just a little. He had no pride left in being feared. The scars on his body were a reminder of battles he had fought for survival, but they had become a reason for others to avoid him, to hate him even more. One evening, as the twin suns dipped behind jagged mountains, the lion climbed to the top of a cliff and looked over the colony. The lights flickered below, and he watched the tiny figures moving about, unaware of the harsh universe surrounding them. A bitter feeling rose inside him, a mix of anger and sadness. How could they fear him when he had never harmed anyone without cause? How could they see only his scars and miss the strength and wisdom in his eyes? He remembered the day he had arrived at the colony as a young lion. Back then, his fur had been smooth and his claws less threatening. But he had been attacked by space raiders, creatures larger and crueler than any he had known. He had fought back, defending himself and others from harm. That was when the first scars appeared, and that was when the fear began. From that moment, people no longer saw him as a protector. They saw him as a threat. He had tried to explain, tried to show that he meant no harm, but words were useless. The galaxy was not kind to those who were different, and his difference had made him a target. Over the years, he had grown stronger. His muscles rippled beneath his burned and scarred fur, and his senses became sharper than any human or alien could imagine. He could hear footsteps from miles away, smell fear before it reached his nose, and see movement even in total darkness. Yet, despite these gifts, the world around him remained cruel and uncaring. Traders, explorers, and even colony guards would shout at him, throw rocks, and set traps, hoping to drive him away. Some had tried to attack him with weapons, thinking the scars and deformities made him weak. They were wrong, but being the deadliest was not enough to earn respect. In this colony, beauty was mistaken for power, and ugliness was mistaken for weakness. No one had the courage to see that his scars were proof of survival, not imperfection. No one could understand that beneath his terrifying appearance lay a heart that knew loyalty, courage, and patience. They only saw what was easy to judge and ignored the truth hidden beneath the surface. One night, a small group of children wandered too close to the cliff where he rested. They had been dared by their older siblings to go near the ugly lion, laughing as they ran. The lion watched silently, his amber eyes glowing in the moonlight. He could have roared, could have lunged, and the children would have scattered in terror. But he did not. He simply stepped closer, his massive paws making the ground tremble slightly. The children froze. One of them whispered, "He's even uglier than the stories." The lion tilted his head, studying them. He could feel their fear, but he also sensed curiosity, a tiny flicker of wonder. They were small, fragile, and unaware of the dangers of the universe. He remembered being young and scared, alone in a galaxy that seemed intent on crushing everything soft and gentle. And so, instead of scaring them, he simply turned and walked away, his tail swishing silently behind him. The children ran back to the colony, their stories exaggerated. But the truth was simple. He had not harmed them. The next day, the council of the colony gathered to discuss the problem of the dangerous lion. They spoke in serious tones, using words meant to sound wise. "He is too dangerous," one said. "No one can control him." "He is an eyesore," another added. "And he frightens our people." The council decided unanimously to banish him from the main colony, sending him to a desolate sector near a dying star. It was a place where no one survived for long. A place considered a graveyard in the galaxy dot when he heard of this. The lion let out a roar that echoed across space, shaking the asteroid cliffs and rattling the windows of the colony buildings. He was angry, yes, but it was not anger alone. It was a sorrow that had grown inside him for years, a grief born from being feared and rejected not for what he did, but for what he looked like. Yet he did not fight them that day. He had learned the hard way that violence only brought more fear, more misunderstanding. Instead, he prepared for the journey into the unknown, knowing that survival required patience and cunning. The first steps into the desolate sector were terrifying. The ground was cracked and hot, and the sky glowed with the light of a dying sun. Alien predators lurked in the shadows, creatures that had long been forgotten by history, and the very air seemed to challenge him. Yet with each step, he adapted. He learned to find water in dry craters, hunt in the darkness, and avoid creatures that were bigger and faster than he was. The loneliness was immense, but for the first time, it felt like freedom. There were no humans to mock him, no council to judge him. Here he could survive, and survival would make him stronger as he settled into his new home. He discovered other abandoned creatures, ones that had been rejected by humans or aliens alike. There were small winged creatures with broken wings, strange insects that glowed in the dark, and even a few alien predators that had learned not to fight him. Slowly, the lion became their protector. He shared food, defended them from danger, and in return, they offered companionship. For the first time in years, he felt a connection that did not come with fear or rejection. He learned that true strength was not just in teeth or claws. It was in loyalty, patience, and courage. Even in the face of cruelty, he could choose kindness. And in the quiet moments under the dying stars, he allowed himself to dream not of acceptance from the colony that had abandoned him, but of a life where he could live without fear, where the scars on his body were marks of pride, not reasons for rejection. The galaxy may have called him ugly. The colony may have called him a monster. But the lion knew the truth. He was more than what they could see. He was alive, he was strong, and he was unbroken. The universe had tested him, and he had endured. And this was only the beginning, because even the ugliest, most feared creature in the galaxy could have a destiny that would shock everyone who had ever turned away from him. The desolate sector was unlike anything the galactic lion had ever seen. The ground was jagged, blackened by heat, and the air was thin and harsh. Twisted rocks jutted up like broken teeth, and the sun, small and dim, barely gave any warmth. The first night was the hardest. Strange sounds echoed through the empty valleys, creatures moving silently, hunting, fighting, or simply surviving. Every shadow seemed alive. Every rustle made him tense. Yet he refused to show fear. He had survived too much to let the unknown shake him. Food was scarce. He had to learn quickly which alien plants were safe to eat, which water sources were clean, and which creatures were worth hunting. Many tried to attack him. Some were faster, others stronger, and some had venom that could kill in moments. But the lion was clever. He studied them, learned their habits, and discovered ways to use the environment to his advantage. Sharp rocks became weapons, narrow caves became hiding spots, and flowing lava channels served as barriers against predators. He was becoming more than a survivor. He was becoming a strategist. One evening, after a long day of exploring, he came across a small creature trapped under fallen rocks. It was a tiny, delicate being with translucent wings and a fragile body. The lion could have ignored it. He had his own survival to think about. But something inside him stirred. Carefully, using his powerful claws with precision, he lifted the rocks and freed the creature. It fluttered weakly and looked at him with wide, grateful eyes. For the first time in a long while, the lion felt a spark of companionship. He realized he was not completely alone. Over the following weeks, more creatures appeared. Some were sick, some were injured, and some had been abandoned by humans or other colonies. The lion, despite his own hardships, took care of them. He shared food, defended them from predators, and guided them to safe areas. Slowly, he began to feel a sense of purpose beyond survival. Protecting others gave him a reason to endure the cold nights, the hunger, and the constant dangers. The harsh environment tested him every day. A sudden sandstorm once swept across a valley, filling the air with dust so thick that he could barely see. He had to rely on his instincts, feeling the vibrations through the ground and listening to the faintest sounds to navigate. Another time, a predator larger than himself attacked, its claws slicing through rock as it lunged. The lion dodged, countered, and finally forced the creature away, wounded but alive. Each challenge sharpened him, teaching lessons about patience, timing, and using intelligence over brute strength. Even in these harsh conditions, the lion never lost his gentleness. When the small creatures he protected became frightened, he would nuzzle them, use his warmth to calm their trembling bodies, and stand as a shield between them and danger. In their eyes, he was not ugly or terrifying. He was a guardian, a friend, a protector. Slowly, he began to understand that beauty and power were not defined by appearances, but by actions. One day, he discovered a cave hidden behind a waterfall of molten rock. It was a place of rare safety, with cool air and shadows that provided shelter from storms and predators. He made it his home. From here, he could watch the sector, plan his movements, and teach the smaller creatures to survive alongside him. The cave walls became marked with scratches and notches, reminders of battles fought and lessons learned. Slowly, the lion's reputation grew among the abandoned and forgotten beings of the sector. Whispers of a protector spread, and even creatures that had once feared him began to trust him. Time passed differently in the desolate sector. Days and nights blended as the lion adapted to the rhythms of survival. Yet he never forgot the colony that had abandoned him. Sometimes, when he looked up at the distant lights on the horizon, he remembered the faces that had turned away, the council that had judged without understanding, and the fear that had followed him for years. But he did not let bitterness consume him. Instead, he focused on the present, on what he could change, his strength, his skills, and the lives he could protect. One particularly harsh night, when the twin moons of the sector hung low and the wind howled like ghosts, the lion faced his greatest test. A massive creature, a predator feared by all in the sector, descended from the cliffs. It was larger than any being he had fought, with claws that could rip through steel and a roar that shook the mountains. For the first time, the smaller creatures cowered in fear. But the lion stood firm. He stepped forward, his eyes glowing in the dark, his muscles tensed, ready for combat. The battle was brutal. The predator struck with speed and power, but the lion used his intelligence and agility. He dodged, countered, and used the terrain to his advantage. Rocks fell, dust filled the air, and the predator's attacks became slower and more desperate. Finally, with a calculated strike, the lion forced the creature to retreat, wounded and defeated. The smaller creatures rushed forward, their admiration and trust in him growing even stronger. That night, they all slept in the safety of the cave, protected by the ugliest and deadliest creature in the galaxy. With each passing day, the lion became more than a survivor. He became a leader, a mentor, and a protector. He taught the smaller creatures how to hunt, how to avoid danger, and how to use their unique abilities to their advantage. They looked up to him, not with fear, but with respect and love. And in doing so, the lion discovered something he had never known before, a sense of family, not bound by appearance or species, but by loyalty and trust. Despite the harsh conditions and constant challenges, he found moments of peace. On quiet nights, he would sit on a cliff, watching the stars, feeling the cold wind on his scars, and listening to the whispers of the creatures he had saved. He realized that even though the colony had abandoned him, he had built something stronger here, a life of meaning, where his strength was valued and his presence mattered. He also began to notice changes in himself. The scars that had once made him feared now reminded him of his resilience. His jagged mane, once seen as a symbol of ugliness, now represented survival and endurance. The claws that had been tools of hunting and defense were now instruments of protection and guidance. And the eyes, sharp and piercing, reflected wisdom and care, not just danger. The desolate sector, once a place of fear and abandonment, had become his kingdom. The smaller creatures depended on him, and he had found a place where he belonged. Yet, even as he built this new life, he could not ignore the thought that the colony, the people who had cast him out, might one day realize the mistake they had made. He did not seek revenge, but he knew that if they returned to the sector in need, the ugliest and deadliest lion in the galaxy would be ready. In these moments, he began to understand a truth that the galaxy often forgot. Appearances could deceive, but courage, intelligence, and kindness were the marks of true greatness. And he, the lion everyone had feared and abandoned, had all of these in abundance. By the time months had passed, the lion had transformed. Not physically, he remained scarred and jagged, but in spirit, he had become something extraordinary. He was no longer the lonely, neglected creature that wandered the asteroid colony. He was a leader, a teacher, and a protector. The very things that had caused others to reject him had shaped him into a being capable of inspiring awe and respect. And as he looked out over the barren landscape, the creatures he had saved gathered around him. He realized that this was only the beginning. The galaxy, which had turned its back on him, would one day see the truth. The ugliest, most feared lion in the universe was no longer just a survivor. He was a force to be reckoned with, a guardian of the forgotten, and a symbol that strength and greatness were not measured by appearances, but by actions. He had been abandoned, feared, and underestimated. But in the desolate sector, he had found purpose, family, and a strength that no one could ignore. And even in the darkest corners of the galaxy, his roar could be heard, a warning, a promise, and a declaration that the ugliest and deadliest lion had finally found his place. Life in the desolate sector had become a rhythm for the galactic lion. Every day brought new challenges, and every challenge made him stronger. He had survived storms that shredded rocks, predators that could crush him with a single strike, and nights so cold that even the thickest fur offered little warmth. Yet he thrived. The harsh environment shaped him in ways the colony could never imagine. The small creatures he had saved now followed him everywhere. They were not just companions. They were students. He taught them how to sense danger before it arrived, how to find food in barren lands, and how to use the terrain to their advantage. Some were winged, some could burrow, and some had strange abilities unknown to humans. The lion learned to coordinate them, turning their weaknesses into strengths. Together, they survived where no one else could. One day, while exploring a canyon that glowed with strange blue crystals, the lion heard a rumble unlike anything he had ever felt. The ground shook violently, and dust filled the air. He tensed, muscles coiling as he searched for the source. From the shadows emerged a creature that made his blood run cold. It was massive, with skin like iron, horns twisted in every direction, and eyes that burned red with anger. It was a predator that had never encountered the lion before, and it saw him as a challenge. The first clash was fierce. The predator attacked with brute force, slamming into the lion with blows that could have shattered bone. But the lion had grown wiser. He dodged, weaved, and used the canyon walls to his advantage. Every strike he made was calculated, every movement precise. The battle lasted hours, neither side yielding, until finally the predator, exhausted and wounded, retreated into the shadows. The lion stood victorious, not with pride, but with a quiet satisfaction. He had protected the creatures that had come to rely on him. The victory spread through the sector. Rumors began to travel, whispered by traders who had ventured too close, and by creatures who had witnessed the fight from a distance. The legend of the galactic lion grew. He was no longer just a survivor. He was a protector, a leader, and a force of nature. And yet, despite the growing tailies, the colony that had abandoned him remained unaware of what he had become. Time continued its relentless march. The lion faced storms that burned the skin, floods that washed away entire canyons, and predators that moved in packs. Each trial sharpened him, honed his instincts, and strengthened his mind. He discovered hidden valleys rich with food and water, learned to predict the movement of creatures, and developed a sense of strategy that made him nearly unstoppable. Every scar he had once despised now served as a reminder of his resilience, each one a badge of survival. One evening, while resting atop a ridge, he saw a small ship crash nearby. Smoke and flames rose from the wreck, and the lion approached cautiously. Inside, he found beings he had never seen before, explorers from a distant galaxy, injured and frightened. The lion could have left them to their fate, but he didn't. Using his strength, he cleared the debris, carried the injured to safety, and even defended them from predators that circled the crash site. Slowly, the explorers regained their composure and realized they were in the presence of something extraordinary. The explorers left the next day, carrying tales of the ugly lion who saved us all. They spoke of his scars, his twisted mane, and his jagged appearance, but also of his courage, intelligence, and loyalty. Slowly, stories of the galactic lion began to reach colonies and outposts across nearby sectors. People who had once feared and shunned him began to wonder about the truth. Had they been wrong all along? Despite the growing legend, the lion remained humble. He did not seek glory. His priority was always the safety of the creatures that had become his family. Some nights, he would watch over them as they slept, thinking about the galaxy that had rejected him and how different life could have been. He understood now that survival was more than just strength. It was intelligence, patience, and compassion. These were the qualities that made him truly formidable. The desolate sector, harsh and unforgiving, became his kingdom. He learned to anticipate storms and hide in caves during meteor showers. He discovered plants with healing properties and water sources that seemed to appear at the right moment. Predators that had once hunted him now avoided him, sensing his power and cunning. Even the most dangerous creatures in the sector learned to respect him, recognizing that he was no ordinary being. One day, while leading his small family of creatures through a narrow valley, he noticed signs of something unusual. Footprints in the dust, markings on rocks, and the faint hum of engines in the distance suggested that humans were approaching. Not the colony that had abandoned him, but strangers, explorers, traders, or perhaps mercenaries. The lion's instincts warned him. He knew humans could bring danger, but they could also bring opportunities. He decided to observe before acting. From a hidden ridge, he watched the humans. They were cautious, scanning the area for threats, but unaware of the power that watched them silently from above. The lion could feel their fear, their curiosity, and their hesitation. He did not reveal himself, but he prepared in case they threatened the creatures under his protection. For the first time, he realized that his actions, even from a distance, could shape the way others saw him. He could be more than a survivor. He could be a legend. Days passed, and the humans explored the sector, leaving traces of their presence. They returned to their ships, but the lion remained vigilant. His senses were sharper than ever, and he could detect danger long before it arrived. The creatures he protected moved with confidence, knowing their guardian would always be ready. And in these moments, the lion reflected on his journey. From an abandoned, feared outcast, he had become a leader, a teacher, and a protector. His scars and ugliness no longer defined him. They were symbols of endurance, courage, and wisdom. As months turned into years, the lion's reputation spread across sectors. Traders spoke of him in hushed tones, explorers shared their encounters, and even the colony that had abandoned him began to hear whispers. Some laughed it off, dismissing the stories as exaggerations. Others wondered if they had made a grave mistake. The ugliest, deadliest lion in the galaxy was no longer just a myth. He was real, and he was unstoppable. The lion, however, did not change. He remained humble, focused on protecting his family and mastering the harsh environment. He had learned the value of patience, understanding, and intelligence. Brute strength alone could not have allowed him to survive or command respect. It was his combination of power, wisdom, and compassion that made him legendary. One evening, as he watched the distant stars shimmer across the desolate landscape, he sensed something new. A presence unlike any he had felt before, not hostile, but curious. It was as if the galaxy itself was watching him, acknowledging his existence and recognizing his strength. For the first time, he felt a sense of belonging, not from a colony that had rejected him, but from the universe itself. And in that moment, the lion understood something important. The challenges he had faced, the loneliness, the rejection, the battles, they had all led him to this point. He had grown stronger, wiser, and more compassionate. He had learned to lead, to protect, and to survive in ways that no other being could. And the ugliest, most feared creature in the galaxy had become more than anyone had ever imagined. He was no longer just the abandoned lion. He was a guardian, a legend, and a force of nature. And the galaxy, which had once ignored and feared him, would soon see the truth, that even the most neglected and rejected can rise to greatness, and that appearances are never a measure of true strength. The lion had learned a lesson the galaxy would never forget. Strength comes from endurance. Leadership comes from compassion. Greatness comes from courage. And sometimes the ugliest, most feared being can become the most extraordinary of all. He roared into the night, a sound that echoed across the valleys and cliffs, a declaration of his presence, a warning to those who would threaten his family, and a promise that he would protect those who could not protect themselves. The creatures around him stirred, recognizing the call of their guardian. They had grown to trust him, love him, and follow him. and the lion knew that together they could face any challenge the galaxy might send their way. The legend of the Galactic Lion was no longer confined to whispers and shadows. It was real, and it was only beginning. The legend of the Galactic Lion had spread far beyond the desolate sector. Traders, explorers, and even outposts in distant galaxies had begun to speak of the creature that no one dared to approach. They told stories of an ugly, scarred lion, the deadliest being in the universe, who protected abandoned creatures and struck fear into even the most fearsome predators. Some called him a monster. Others whispered that he was a guardian sent by the universe itself. Back on the colony that had abandoned him, life continued as it always had. People moved about their daily routines, unaware of the power they had once ignored. Yet rumors began to reach them, faint whispers of travelers who had seen the lion, of ships that had encountered him, of creatures that survived only because of his protection. At first, the council dismissed these tales as exaggerations. They could not imagine that the feared and rejected lion could have grown into something so extraordinary. But then the first sign came. A scout ship returning from the desolate sector brought news that could not be ignored. Entire trade convoys had been stopped, not by pirates, but by a single presence, a massive, scarred lion commanding respect and fear. The traders spoke of the way the ground seemed to tremble when he walked, of his roar that echoed across valleys, and of his intelligence in coordinating attacks and defenses. A council felt a chill. They had turned their backs on this creature, laughed at his scars, and now they were learning that he had become something far greater than anyone could imagine. Meanwhile, in the desolate sector, the lion sensed the shifts in the galaxy. Ships flew too close to his territory, scouts searched the valleys, and whispers of humans exploring his lands reached his sharp ears. He observed silently, not from fear, but from calculation. The colony that had abandoned him might come, and if they did, they would find a lion transformed, a force of nature ready to defend his family and his home. One day, a small fleet of explorers arrived at the edge of his territory. They were cautious, scanning for threats, unaware of the power watching them from the cliffs above. The lion waited, observing every movement. He noticed the fear in their eyes, the hesitation in their steps, and the constant communication between their ships. He could have attacked immediately, but he held back. He wanted them to understand who he had become, to realize that he was not just an ugly, abandoned creature. They had underestimated him for too long. The humans ventured further, unaware of the predator that had learned the terrain, the climate, and the behavior of every creature in the sector. They set up small outposts, marking territory, confident that they were in control. The lion, with his smaller family of creatures, watched from hidden caves, observing their weaknesses and strengths. He was patient, waiting for the moment when action was necessary, when protection of his domain required more than observation. Suddenly, one of the scouts wandered too close to a valley where dangerous predators roamed. The lion's instincts kicked in. With a roar that shook the cliffs, he appeared, a terrifying silhouette against the dim light of the dying sun. The scout froze, fear taking over. The lion did not harm him. Instead, he guided him away from danger, demonstrating power and control without cruelty. The scout returned to the fleet with stories of the massive lion, now not just feared, but respected. As days passed, the presence of the lion changed the behavior of humans across the sector. Ships approached cautiously, trade convoys rerouted, and even smugglers avoided the area. The colony that had abandoned him began to feel the consequences of their ignorance. They realized that a creature they had once dismissed as ugly and dangerous now held control over the very roots and resources they depended on. Panic and curiosity spread among the council members. What had they created by turning their back on him? The lion, however, remained focused on his family. The small creatures he had protected continued to thrive under his guidance. He taught them to move silently, to avoid unnecessary conflicts, and to trust in his leadership. Every day he grew stronger, more intelligent, and more respected, not just by those who feared him, but by those who relied on him. His scars, once symbols of neglect and fear, had become symbols of wisdom and endurance. Every mark on his body told a story of survival, of protection, of growth. One evening, the colony sent a larger fleet into the sector, intending to explore and assert control. The lion watched silently from the cliffs, calculating every move. The ships moved with caution, scanning the terrain, unaware of the danger beneath their feet. When they approached a canyon filled with hidden predators, the lion acted. With precision, he coordinated his smaller allies, guiding the predators to block the ship's path without causing destruction. The humans were stunned. They saw signs of a powerful being more intelligent than any predator they had faced, more strategic than any commander they had known. The council received reports of the fleet's experience and could no longer deny the truth. The lion they had abandoned had become something beyond their understanding. He was not just a survivor. He was a guardian, a leader, and a force that demanded respect. The colony felt fear for the first time, not because of his ugliness, but because of the power, intelligence, and influence he wielded. They realized that neglecting him had been their gravest mistake. Meanwhile, the lion continued to grow in both skill and wisdom. He discovered new valleys rich with resources, learned to predict cosmic storms, and developed strategies that allowed his family of creatures to thrive even in the harshest conditions. He trained them to defend themselves, to recognize threats, and to move with precision and purpose. Together, they became a force no one dared to challenge. Despite his power, the lion never sought revenge. He did not attack the colony or their fleet. He understood that his strength was not for destruction, but for protection. He had learned that true power lay in restraint, intelligence, and compassion. The humans who approached him learned this lesson quickly. They feared his power, but they could not deny the respect he commanded. As the years passed, the lion's reputation reached even further. Outposts, traders, and explorers spoke of the creature that had transformed a desolate sector into a kingdom of survival and strength. They told of the scars that marked his body, the intelligence in his eyes, and the courage he displayed in protecting the weak. The ugliest and deadliest lion in the galaxy had become a symbol of resilience and wisdom, a force that no one could ignore. And yet, even as his legend grew, the lion remained focused on his family. He continued to guide them, protect them, and teach them. He understood that true greatness was measured not by fear or appearances, but by the ability to protect, lead, and endure. His actions inspired loyalty, respect, and admiration from all who witnessed them. The colony that had abandoned him could only watch from afar, realizing too late the consequences of their neglect. The lion they had once feared and shunned now held power over a sector of the galaxy, shaping events, protecting the weak, and commanding respect from both humans and creatures alike. Their mistake had become a lesson for all. Appearances could deceive, neglect could backfire, and underestimating the abandoned could lead to unforeseen consequences. And in the quiet moments, when the stars shone brightly over the desolate sector, the lion would look out across the valleys, watching over his family and his kingdom. He knew that the galaxy had changed, that his presence was now acknowledged and respected. He had endured pain, rejection, and neglect, but he had transformed it all into strength, wisdom, and purpose. The ugliest, deadliest lion in the galaxy had become more than anyone could imagine. He was a guardian, a leader, and a symbol of resilience. And while the colony that abandoned him could only watch and wonder, he continued to thrive, protect, and teach, proving that even in the harshest conditions, greatness could emerge where it was least expected. the lion's roar echoed across the cliffs and valleys, a sound that carried both warning and reassurance. It told the galaxy that he was here, that he was powerful, and that he would protect those who could not protect themselves. He had been neglected, feared, and abandoned, but he had risen stronger, wiser, and more respected than anyone could have imagined. And the galaxy, for the first time, began to understand the truth, that the ugliest and most feared creature could become the most extraordinary, the most respected, and the most powerful, simply by enduring, learning, and leading. The colony that had abandoned the galactic lion never expected that one day they would face a threat they could not handle alone. Traders returning from distant sectors brought warnings of marauder fleets, groups of ruthless pirates who had begun targeting nearby colonies. These marauders attacked without mercy, plundering supplies, destroying settlements, and leaving destruction in their wake. The council grew worried. For the first time, they realized that no human force could protect them from what was coming. In the desolate sector, the lion had been aware of the shifts in the galaxy. He had felt the movements of the marauders from afar, sensed the fear in creatures who fled from ships, and watched as chaos began to spread. He did not act immediately. He had learned patience. He had learned that appearances alone could mislead others. And now he understood that the time had come to show the galaxy the true power of the ugliest and deadliest lion, the first sign of the marauders. Arrival came as a shadow passed over the mountains. Ships, black and sleek, cut through the sky, scanning the surface for settlements. The colony panicked as scouts reported the size of the fleet. Their weapons, trained on local threats, were useless against these marauders. For the first time, the humans felt the helplessness that the lion had endured for years. Their fear was palpable, and it filled the air like a heavy fog. High above the cliffs, the lion watched silently. His scars glinted in the dim light, his jagged mane blowing in the wind. He could feel the tension, the fear, and the desperation. For years, the colony had laughed at him, turned away from him, and neglected him. But now they would see what they had lost. Not for revenge, but to protect life, to demonstrate that true strength was not measured by appearances, and to show that courage could emerge from the most unexpected places. When the marauder fleet began to descend upon the colony, the lion acted. He moved with speed that no human could match, leaping across cliffs, bounding through valleys, and coordinating his small army of creatures. Birds, insects, and strange alien beings worked together under his guidance. Rocks tumbled down cliffs, sandstones obscured visibility, and predators that had been tamed or guided by the lion appeared in the paths of the marauders. The humans, terrified and unprepared, could only watch in awe. The first ship attempted a landing near the colony's central plaza. Before it could touch the ground, the lion appeared. He leaped onto the ship, claws slicing through metal and engines failing under his weight and force. The marauders panicked, realizing they were no longer in control. From the cliffs, the other creatures guided by the lion attacked in synchronized precision. Smaller predators caused chaos among the ranks, while flying creatures disrupted the ship's navigation. Every move was calculated, every action purposeful. The ugliest, deadliest lion in the galaxy had become the ultimate defender. The colony's people were stunned. Those who had once mocked him, who had laughed at his scars, who had abandoned him in fear, now saw him in a new light. He was not just a survivor. He was a hero, a guardian who had come to save lives they had thought were beyond protection. Children who had once hidden at the sight of him now watched in awe, seeing strength, courage, and intelligence manifest in a way they had never imagined. One of the marauder ships broke away from the main group and tried to attack a supply depot. The lion anticipated the move. With a roar that echoed across the colony, he charged. The ground shook beneath him as he leaped onto the ship, dismantling it with skill and precision. The marauders inside scrambled, unable to comprehend the force they faced. Some were thrown into the air, others trapped as their engines failed, and all were forced to retreat. The humans were speechless. The creature they had once feared, mocked, and abandoned had become their savior. The battle continued for hours. The marauders attempted to regroup, but the lion and his allies moved with unmatched strategy. The creatures under his guidance blocked paths, set traps, and created obstacles that delayed and confused the attackers. Smoke, dust, and shadows filled the air, masking the colony from view. The lion remained at the center of it all, a force of nature coordinating every attack, protecting every life, and ensuring that the humans could survive. When the final ship tried to escape, the lion was there. He leaped with incredible speed, catching the ship before it could flee. With one swipe of his massive paw, he disabled its engines, forcing the marauders to surrender. By the end of the day, the fleet had retreated, broken and defeated. The colony was safe, and not a single life under the lion's protection was lost. The council, humbled and awed, could not believe what they had witnessed. They had feared, ignored, and abandoned this creature for years, and now he had saved them from destruction. They approached cautiously, unsure if they should show gratitude or fear. The lion watched silently, his amber eyes glowing, his body tense but calm. When he saw the fear and respect in their faces, he realized that his message had been received. True strength did not come from weapons alone, but from courage, intelligence, and compassion. Children emerged from hiding, cautiously approaching the lion. Some reached out, afraid to touch the scars and burned fur, yet drawn by the presence of someone who had protected them when no one else could. The lion lowered his head, allowing them to feel his warmth and strength. In that moment, fear melted into admiration, and admiration became trust. The colony began to see him for what he truly was: a guardian, a leader, and a symbol of resilience. The humans began to speak, their voices hesitant at first. We were wrong," one said. "We judged you by your appearance. We did not understand your strength." The lion did not respond. Words were unnecessary. His actions had spoken louder than any apology could. The colony understood that they had lost precious years by neglecting him. But now they had learned the value of courage, loyalty, and intelligence over appearances. Over the following weeks, the colony rebuilt. The humans repaired structures, restored trade, and learned to coexist with the creatures that the lion had protected. The smaller creatures, once unseen and abandoned, now moved freely among the humans, no longer feared or neglected. And at the center of it all, the lion remained a silent guardian, watching over the colony, ensuring that safety, respect, and harmony endured. Word of the battle spread across neighboring sectors. Traders spoke of the battle against the marauders, of the ships defeated without human intervention, and of the lion who had orchestrated the defense. Even distant colonies began to take note, understanding that appearances could be deceiving, and that the ugliest, deadliest creature could also be the wisest and most compassionate. Despite the fame and respect, the lion did not change. He continued to train his small family of creatures, guiding them, protecting them, and teaching them the skills they needed to survive. He roamed the cliffs, valleys, and ridges, ever vigilant, always prepared. His scars, once symbols of neglect and fear, had become symbols of wisdom, endurance, and protection. Every mark told a story of survival, of courage, and of the lives he had saved. The colony now depended on him, not out of fear, but out of trust. They learned that true greatness was not measured by beauty or intimidation, but by the ability to protect, guide, and endure. And while some still whispered about his appearance, no one could deny his power, intelligence, and heart. The ugliest, deadliest lion in the galaxy had become a symbol of hope, courage, and resilience for all who witnessed his actions. And in the quiet moments, when the stars shone brightly over the desolate sector, the lion would sit atop a cliff, watching the colony, listening to the whispers of his small family of creatures, and feeling the weight of the galaxy around him. He had been abandoned, feared, and neglected, but he had risen above it all. His roar, echoing across valleys and mountains, was not just a warning to enemies, it was a promise to protect, to endure, and to lead. The humans who once rejected him now understood a profound truth, that appearances could deceive. Neglect could be costly, and courage and intelligence could come from the most unexpected places. The lion had shown them that even the ugliest and most feared being could rise to greatness, protect those in need, and change the course of lives forever. And so, the galactic lion continued to watch, protect, and lead. He had proven that strength, wisdom, and compassion could coexist in the most unlikely being. The colony, once blind to his worth, had learned the lesson they would never forget. To judge by appearances is to miss the true power and heart within. The lion had been abandoned, feared, and neglected, but he had risen to become a guardian, a leader, and a symbol of hope. And the galaxy, for the first time, began to understand the truth, that greatness is not defined by beauty or appearances, but by courage, intelligence, and the willingness to protect those who cannot protect themselves. After the battle with the Marauder fleet, life in the desolate sector began to settle into a new rhythm. The galactic lion had proven himself beyond any doubt. He was no longer just the ugly, feared creature that humans and colonies once neglected. He was a legend, a guardian whose courage, intelligence, and compassion had saved lives and reshaped the galaxy's understanding of strength. Yet he did not seek fame. His focus remained on protecting his family of creatures and maintaining the safety of the lands he had claimed as home. The colony that had abandoned him had changed. The humans now approached with respect, some cautiously, others with gratitude. Children, once terrified of the scarred, jagged mane and glowing amber eyes, now ran to play near him. They touched his fur, feeling the warmth and power beneath the scars, and laughed as he nuzzled them gently. The adults, too, had learned humility. They watched from a distance, realizing that the creature they had judged and cast aside had become a force capable of teaching them lessons they could never have learned on their own. The lion had become more than a protector. He had become a teacher. He trained the humans who were willing to learn, showing them how to move carefully in dangerous terrain, how to anticipate threats, and how to survive in ways that relied on intelligence as much as strength. His lessons were harsh but fair. Those who refused to learn were left to face their mistakes, while those who listened gained skills that would save their lives. Slowly, a bond grew. The humans who had once rejected him now depended on his wisdom, recognizing that appearances had nothing to do with true power. Word of the lion's deeds spread across nearby sectors. Traders spoke of his battles, explorers told tales of his intelligence, and even distant colonies began to respect the stories they heard. The ugliest and deadliest lion in the galaxy had become a symbol not of fear, but of resilience, courage, and leadership. Ships approaching the desolate sector now did so with caution, and many came seeking guidance or protection, knowing that this legendary creature would not tolerate unnecessary conflict. Despite his fame, the lion remained humble. He never sought recognition. He was content to walk the cliffs, patrol the valleys, and watch over the creatures he had saved. Each day brought new challenges, storms, predators, or environmental shifts, but he faced them with calm determination. His scars, once reminders of neglect and fear, now told a story of endurance, survival, and unwavering courage. The jagged mane that had made others cringe was now a symbol of wisdom and strength. One quiet evening, the lion sat atop his favorite cliff, gazing at the stars. The sky stretched endlessly, speckled with lights from distant galaxies. He reflected on his journey, the abandonment, the fear, the countless battles, and the loneliness that had once consumed him. Yet all of it had shaped him. Without the rejection, he might never have grown so strong. Without the dangers, he might never have learned to lead. And without the loneliness, he might never have discovered the capacity for compassion that now defined him. The creatures he had saved nestled around him, some on his back, some by his paws, all trusting and loyal. They had grown in strength and intelligence under his guidance. They were no longer weak, abandoned beings. They were a community, a family bound not by species, but by loyalty, trust, and shared survival. And in them, the lion found something he had never had before: a sense of belonging, a purpose that transcended mere survival. The colony now looked to him not only as a protector, but as a leader who could guide them through challenges. When disputes arose, he mediated with calm authority, ensuring fairness and safety. When trade convoys approached, he advised them on safe routes. When threats appeared, he led his family and allies with precision. The humans who had once feared and mocked him now realized that he was more than a creature. They saw a being of wisdom, strategy, and compassion. Yet even with all the respect and recognition, the lion remained vigilant. He knew the galaxy was unpredictable, that danger could appear at any moment. His senses, sharpened by years of survival, could detect threats long before they reached the colony. And whenever danger appeared, he acted swiftly and decisively, protecting lives with a combination of strength, intelligence, and courage. The legend of the lion was no accident. It was the result of every choice he had made, every lesson he had learned, and every life he had saved. The humans began to document his deeds, sending reports to distant colonies, sharing stories of the battles he had fought, the creatures he had protected, and the wisdom he had imparted. Traders began to treat the desolate sector as a place of respect, and explorers approached with caution and reverence. Even the colony that had abandoned him now understood the gravity of their mistake. They had neglected a being who had grown beyond their understanding, and now they looked to him for guidance, protection, and insight. One day, a council of elders from neighboring colonies arrived to witness the lion for themselves. They came in small ships, hesitant and cautious. As they landed, the lion appeared, his amber eyes glowing in the dim light. He did not roar, he did not attack. He simply observed, calm and imposing. The elders approached, recognizing that they were in the presence of someone extraordinary. One by one, they acknowledged their respect, speaking of the lessons they had learned from the stories of his deeds. The lion accepted their recognition not with pride, but with quiet understanding. The elder council asked him to guide them, to share his strategies for survival, and to help their colonies learn from the desolate sector. The lion agreed, but on his terms. He would not seek power over humans or dictate their lives. He would teach, protect, and guide those who were willing to learn and respect the balance of life. Through this, he ensured that his legacy would extend far beyond his immediate family of creatures and the abandoned colony that had once rejected him. As years passed, the lion became a symbol across galaxies. His story inspired others, creatures and humans alike, to look beyond appearances, to value courage, intelligence, and compassion, and to understand that strength was not measured by fear, but by the willingness to protect and lead. Schools, colonies, and trade hubs began to teach lessons inspired by his actions. The ugliest, deadliest lion in the galaxy had become a beacon of hope, resilience, and wisdom. Even in old age, the lion remained vigilant. His movements had slowed slightly, and his scars were deeper, but his mind was sharper than ever. He continued to train his family, guide humans, and protect the sector. Every roar carried weight, every movement commanded attention, and every decision reflected the wisdom of a lifetime spent surviving, learning, and leading. He had become more than anyone could have imagined, a guardian, a teacher, and a legend. One evening, as the twin moons of the sector hung low in the sky, the lion walked along the cliffs, watching the colony below. Children played safely under his watch. Humans moved with respect, and his family of creatures thrived in the environment he had shaped. He realized that he had achieved something extraordinary. He had turned rejection into strength, fear into respect, and loneliness into a community. His life, once marked by neglect and abandonment, was now a story of triumph, resilience, and greatness. The lion understood that true greatness was not about appearances, power, or fear. It was about endurance, compassion, intelligence, and the courage to protect those who could not protect themselves. He had lived this truth every day of his life, and now the galaxy recognized it. He had become a legend not because of the scars he bore or the fear he inspired, but because of the choices he made, the lives he saved, and the wisdom he shared. As the stars sparkled above, the lion let out a final mighty roar, echoing across valleys, cliffs, and distant galaxies. It was a roar that carried not only power, but a message, that even the most abandoned, feared, and rejected beings could rise to greatness, that courage, intelligence, and compassion were the true measures of strength, and that the ugliest and deadliest lion had found his place in the universe. And so, the galactic lion continued to watch, protect, and guide. His family thrived, the colony learned humility and respect, and the galaxy remembered his story. The creature once abandoned and feared had become a symbol of hope, courage, and wisdom. He had turned neglect into triumph, fear into respect, and isolation into a legacy that would endure across generations. The lion had faced abandonment, danger, and rejection, yet he had transformed it all into power, wisdom, and compassion. He had proven that greatness is not defined by appearances, but by actions. The galaxy would never forget him, the ugliest, deadliest, and most extraordinary lion who had changed the course of lives, inspired hope, and shown that even the most neglected can rise to greatness. And as the night settled over the desolate sector, with stars reflecting in the eyes of those he protected, the lion rested. His body was scarred, his mane jagged, and his face weathered by time, but his heart, mind, and spirit remained unbroken. The legacy of the galactic lion was secure. He had become more than a creature feared and abandoned. He had become a legend,